There's this thing that happens to me sometimes. I pass a street I've never turned down and I'll think, who lives there? And then I think, who would I be if I lived there? Which sounds like the most nothing thought a person can have. But it doesn't feel like nothing when it happens. I think there's a word for this. Sonder. That thing where you realize every single person has a whole interior life as complex as yours. A whole architecture of memory and worry and... Anyway, I'm not really talking about Sonder. I'm talking about the grief of imagining your unlived lives. Because I don't just wonder who lives on that street. I wonder if I could have been that person. If some version of me, shaped slightly differently by slightly different circumstances, is turning into that driveway right now. I used to have this habit of picking a random stranger and just wondering what their life was like. Just, that woman with the tired eyes. Does she go home to someone who loves her? Does she have a job she chose or one that chose her? Does she lie awake at night thinking about a version of herself that never happened? I wasn't just wondering about strangers anymore. I was doing it to myself. Sitting there imagining a parallel me, the one who didn't quit school, or said no instead of being miserable in a miserable relationship. And the weird thing is, it feels like grief. Like mourning someone who never existed but somehow still feels real enough to miss. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent years thinking about personal identity, and what he found was that the self is far less fixed than we think. That tiny changes in circumstance would have produced an entirely different person. Which means every choice you didn't make wasn't just a road not taken, it was a whole person left unborn. And I think we feel that without being able to say it. That ache when you hear a song from a specific summer and you think, I had a different future ahead of me back then, and I didn't know it yet, and I almost want to warm that version of me, and I want to be him, and I don't even know what I'd change if I could. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called this the anxiety of possibility, the dizziness you feel when you realize you could have been anything, which means you also had to become just one thing, which means loss is built into existence itself, not as an accident, but as a condition. There's a word I found once in the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, Vemodalen. The frustration of photographing something beautiful when you know 1,000 people have already photographed it better. But the one that wrecked me was lachecism, the desire to be struck by disaster, to have your life interrupted from the outside so the choice gets made for you. I'm standing at the edge of life and feeling its absence. There's a terror in the idea that there exists someone out there who is me, but is also not me. A million alternate versions of my life exist. I could have been a million things. I could have went to university for all the good it would do to my life. Right now it seems rather redundant. I could have learnt guitar and sang Beatles songs by moonlight for supper after whisking some poor lady off her feet. I could have moved to another city, moved back here and into property with my mom, opened a bottle of red and climbed Redwood. It's a fascinating thought, this alternate me, existing somewhere else in the cosmos, waiting till I'm brave enough to hop onto the next timeline like some sci-fi movie. The what-ifs, the could-have-beens, the might-have-beens, they've always existed, cocooned inside of me as I wait in this universal waiting room of indecisive procrastination. I built another life through the lens of my inner voice. He's terribly sarcastic. He puts me down and dreams up a healthier, more successful version of me with beautiful friends, an attractive other half, a better job and self-confidence who flies to South America and bungee jumps off a touristy spot. He's quite the jerk. I don't think one can separate an alternate self from who they are in this timeline. I think the two versions of oneself, be they stuck in a waiting room or bungee jumping off aerial bridges, are one and the same. There's continuity. And counting on the cliché, every time I've told myself I was becoming a different person, I would inevitably end up in the same place. This alternate self thing bugs me. The alternate selves I imagined are a figment of my self-expectations, an ideal self. And like most ideals, they're not entirely feasible. Most of the time I'm noticing strangers buying things I've never tried, wearing a jacket I couldn't pull off, and I'm thinking, there's a whole world in there. a whole life running parallel to mine that I'll never access. And for some reason that makes me feel something. Not envy, and not longing. It's more like standing outside a house at night, one with the lights on inside, warm, and you know you're not supposed to go in, and you also know you're not even sure you want to go in, and yet you stand there for a moment longer than makes sense. The grief of unlived lives isn't about what you missed. I think it's about the realization that you are always, only ever one person. One angle of incidence on a world that has infinite angles. And that's not a tragedy. Maybe it's just the shape of being alive.